And that theme has been covered in different ways over the past two days. By our guest speaker and by focus internally on our staff, as we did yesterday, and through the discussions at the regional forum, which we also had yesterday. Now, today, we will focus on how SAIs can widen their circles and their perspectives through medium and long-term partnerships between peers. A theme we have chosen to call Forward Together, to emphasize how progress and learning can be strengthened through peer-to-peer cooperation. And I think you recall the guest speaker day before yesterday who talked about that we are each other's business cases, which is, I think, a very good starting point for a peer-to-peer learning exercise. Now, the peer-to-peer is a theme with very deep roots within our global community. In the INTOSAI strategic plan, one of CBC's key strategies to achieve its goal is to support and promote medium to long-term peer-to-peer cooperation between SAIs in support of institutional capacity development. And the global stock-taking report, which we referred to yesterday, shows that there is an increase in different types of peer-to-peer cooperation. And already in the previous global survey, it was clear that peer-to-peer cooperation is the preferred modality for SAIs for capacity development. Now, and those of you who are CBC frequent flyers, you will recall that one of the themes in the CBC meeting in Cape Town 2 years ago was maximizing SAI cooperation in support of capacity development, and touched upon peer-to-peer collaboration in different forms, be it peer reviews, cooperative audits, and joint training. Now, today, well, first I should say that when we met in Washington last year, we concluded that there was a need to scale up peer-to-peer cooperation. And we were tasked, together with IDI, to consider feasible means through which SAI peer-to-peer support could be scaled up. So this thematic discussion will focus on long-term partnerships between peer organizations. Common missions, common identity, and not least, they build on trust. Building on this platform, the common purpose of these partnerships is capacity development, often taking a holistic approach, working with a whole SAI as an organization, taking into consideration its context, ambitions, and preconditions. These partnerships can be financed in different ways. They can be funded by donor funding, but they can also be carried out with no external funding, but with each SAI use their own funding to meet their own costs. So there are different funding modalities for peer-to-peer support, but what unites them is the approach of peers working together, shoulder to shoulder as colleagues. Now, by definition, capacity development needs to build on a long-term approach. And those of you who have studied our guide on the subject, the CBC Guide on Capacity Development, will see that long-term and holistic approaches are needed. All of us have been involved in changing working methods, approaches in our own organizations, introducing new standards or new technical platforms, training staff, restructuring the organization to meet new requirements, or what have you. And we know that it requires investment in both time and resources, a well-considered approach, and it requires patience and perseverance to succeed. And at our opening session, our guest speaker reminded us that we need to projectize and plan, and we need to grasp opportunities. Now, peer-to-peer cooperation is a well-tested approach in our community. The CBC and the INTOSAI regions and other INTOSAI bodies have for a long time been engaged in a discussion how to continuously learn from this experience. And half a year ago, 10 months ago, in Graz, at the regional meeting in Graz, Austria, all regions agreed that peer-to-peer support was a priority to them and there was a need to scale it up. And responding to that request, the CBC leadership decided to set up a particular work stream, a special work stream, and to devote a substantial part of the annual meeting and the annual meetings further developing good practice for peer-to-peer cooperation. Now, in order to create a maximum engagement and involvement of all participants and to make sure that each of you can bring something valuable back home, either as a provider of peer-to-peer support or as a recipient of peer-to-peer support. We also have some SAIs who do not fall into either of these categories, but who are engaged in their own continuous capacity development without external support. And finally, we have a number of donors who in many instances are funding peer-to-peer cooperation in various form and in various approaches. So we hope that we all of us, will be a bit wiser when we leave this session and that we have learned some new insights and perhaps some good practices that we feel that we can take back home, both as a provider, as a funder, or as a recipient of peer-to-peer support. Now, there will be 5 stations, 5 tables in this room, and I will introduce them to you in a while. Each of those tables is chaired by a representative from a SAI or a region engaged in institutional capacity development through peer-to-peer cooperation. In most cases, they are joined by a peer partner. And I will present the speakers to you now, and I would like the speakers I introduce to just stand up so everyone will see where your particular table is. So there are 5 cases. The first one is building successful peer-to-peer cooperation in a twinning format, which is an EU twinning project between the SAI of Albania and SAI Poland. And I think the Mr. Jacek Jaserski from Poland will represent the providing SAI. The second table is building partnerships for enhanced professional practices, which is a capacity development of SAI Nepal, managed by the World Bank and funded through a multi-donor trust fund. And from Nepal, Mr. Babu Ram, Deputy Auditor General, and the World Bank representative is Mr. Frank Bessette. Could you rise, Frank? So that is the Nepal table. The third table is developing performance audit capacity through bilateral cooperation, which is capacity development of SAI Iraq in cooperation with SAI Netherlands. Now, the Deputy Auditor General, Dr. Alaf from Iraq, had to cancel at the very last moment his participation. So the project manager from the Netherlands Court of Audit, Mr. Abdel El Abbasi, will play both roles and will do so, I'm sure, very successfully. Then the fourth table is on the SAI of Kenya and the growth of performance audit in audit operations, which is a peer-to-peer cooperation between Kenya and the SAI of Sweden, and Kenya will be represented by Freddie Odhiambo. Freddie, could you rise up, please? And Sweden will be represented by Mr. Oskar Karnebeck. And finally, the fifth table is long-term twinning arrangements in support of small island states. which is the SAI of New Zealand partnerships with Cook Island and Samoa. It will be presented by Pasai Tio. So this is the fifth table. Those are the topics. Now, for this coffee table discussion to have desired results, we have asked the presenter at each table to be brief and to ask all the participants to get involved. You will be asked later to pick a table, and you will then be asked to rotate. I will explain that in a while. Each presenter at the table will present case, do so briefly, and you might have seen also in the documentation to the meeting that there has been a small leaflet describing each partnership. So if you have skimmed through that, you will have a basic understanding what the partnership. Chair at your table, you will get approximately 15-20 minutes to ask your questions to the table to understand what this partnership is all about and what has been happening. And I would encourage all of you to consider what you yourself or your organization might learn from what you hear. Are there ideas or approaches that you can bring with you in your context, again, either as a provider, as a funder, or as a recipient? Were you inspired to reconsider your own methods, your own approaches? Now, at each table there is a note taker who will try to catch the most central points in the discussion and who will summarize these points at the end of each round of discussion. Now, then I will blow a whistle or whatever and call your attention, and you will be able to shift to another table so that you have another 30 minutes or 25-30 minutes at another table to learn and discuss another example. So all in all, you will be able to attend 3 tables during this session. So you will have ample opportunity to really increase your insight of new approaches and new methods. Now, the information captured by the note takers will be made available to all of you, so you can learn also from the cases that you haven't been part of, and there will be sheets of paper that will summarize this into for everyone to see. Now, concluding this introduction, then, I will invite each of you to please pick one of the 5 tables with speakers ready to present their case. Please try to divide a bit between the tables. I think we are like 70 people in this room, so you shouldn't be more than 12-15 people around the table. It will be a bit crammed. Take chairs from other tables. Make sure you sit around in a wide circle. Improvise. This is we want to have an atmosphere where we improvise, we find solutions, no pre-arranged seating, make it in the discussion. I will be a fairly strict timekeeper, and I will let you know when there are 5 minutes left, so you know when you should sum up and be ready to move to another table. And of course, I will also let you know when there is coffee available. Perhaps that will, for some of you, be the most important household announcement of all. Now, are there any practical questions? Or have I might have been carried away a bit in my introduction, but are instructions clear? In that case, perhaps we could just repeat then what the cases are. We have the twinning project between SAI Albania and SAI Poland, which is in the far, from my side, the far right down there. Please, could you just stand up again, Rinaldo, so we can see? Yes, there we have. Then we have the capacity development of SAI Nepal, which is managed by the World Bank, which is in that corner. The third table is the capacity development of SAI Iraq in cooperation with SAI Netherlands, which is the center table there. The fourth table is the peer-to-peer cooperation between SAI Kenya and SAI Sweden, which is in this northwestern corner. And the fifth is New Zealand's partnership with Cook Island and Samoa, presented by PASAI, which is this. Right? Now, I will now ask you to pick your first, well, first you need to stand up. Then you go to the table. Right.